This is the primal scream of a dying regime.
Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Wednesday, 5 August, year of Euro 2026. Are we going to have any follow-up on that? Are there going to be any indictments? Are there going to be any perp walks? Taking apart and dismantling the deep state is a super high priority for the MAGA base and for people who voted for President Trump and support President Trump. Maybe not so much for the people around him. Just not. They fought these revelations. They fought, and there's been no support in the messaging. No surrogates out there supporting this. None. Zero. But the base they're outraged by this. And now this revelation that they came after President Trump, knowing it was wrong. Think about that for a second. People in the FBI, this is why it's so corrupt. And Cash, this is why, the whole crime thing, it's just jumping out of the helicopters, having the TV shows, it's all irrelevant. This is the beating heart of it. It's a corrupt institution. You ought to move out of the Hoover building, take it down brick by brick, salt the earth around it, and put a park there in memory of the deep state. FBI, half of the FBI should be structurally gone. Not about people. This is not about bad apples. These are institutions that are out of control. How out of control are they, Steve? Here's how out of control they are. You saw Fauci the other day. You've seen this now with John Solomon. They went after a commander-in-chief duly elected by the American people. No, because I said that election is not good enough. He's a Russian agent. Let that sink in for a second. This is the time he's going to the Middle East to have the first of the, hey, can't we all get along? Can't we stop the funding? What was the big deal there? The memo to stop the funding of terrorism in Europe and the United States of America. Remember all the incidents we had in Europe and in the U.S. during the Obama era? We got to stop that because Qatar, particularly, who wouldn't sign it, you're funding, and the Saudis are almost just as bad, you're funding to take the heat off you, and all the playboys are hanging out in London and going to the casinos and chasing all the broads to take the heat off you. You're going to go out, you're going to spread jihad to the West. During that time when President Trump is there trying to get something done and sort that mess out without having to go to war, to sort that mess out, which led to the Abraham Accords, they are coming after him in the exact same moment you're there. They're coming after him as being a Russian agent. Let that sink in. And I hope the President of the United States are reading these reports and asking the question, well, what action are we taking? This is like in golf, when you got to eyeball the guy you're playing with, because not for your own benefit, you're protecting the field. You're doing it because you got to make sure they're not cheating or moving the ball or doing whatever. They're playing by the rules of golf. Why? You're protecting the field, not protecting yourself. You're protecting the field. You're protecting all the other golfers. President Trump is protecting the office of the President of the United States. They came after the office of the President of the United States and said an individual sitting there as commander-in-chief with the finger right above the red button, the nuclear codes. No, not the one that called for Diet Cokes. The nuclear codes. That he's a Russian agent. And the people below him knew it was a lie. Knowing it's a lie is double or triple down. But even doing it, unless it was at the highest levels and you had so much information that did that, that's the type of thing that rips the country apart. It's one of the reasons the country's ripped apart today. The deep state would not accept the election of Donald Trump. Why? Because of you. It ain't because of Trump. Heck, Trump admitted he was part of the system. That's why he's so courageous and to call it out on all its phoniness. He fought his way from Queens into Manhattan, into the middle of the most, lucrative, complicated real estate market in the world. That's very tough to compete in, and the media industry. This is why they hate him. They think he's apostate. It was you they hate. And once you go back, you voted him in. And then the FBI said, oh, MAGA, this is how dumb you are and delusional. You actually voted in a Russian agent, an agent of Putin. My God. And if we'd been able to do what we should have done with Russia in those days, you wouldn't have had this mess today. This was the deep state. This was the deep state in all its glory. Reversing nullification. I call it the nullification project. They want to nullify an election. Let me get Lara Logan here in a moment. She's been fighting this from day one and called them all out at the same time. And this is why they try to break her and crush her. Not just Fauci, but this. And this is systemic. It's just not bad apples, although the bad apples have to be prosecuted. Yes, McCabe, now we understand why you whined and cried on CNN and said, we're having deep conversations at home whether we should leave the country. Well, brother, go back and have that conversation tonight. Because if you're not rolled up and you're not prosecuted, then the whole system's a joke. Garland Favorito, this from Voter GA. This is another thing. We were grabbing ballots months ago about the stolen election in Georgia. We went to court and fought Norm Eisen and fought Abby Lowell and won. Right? We still got the ballots. They want to get them and destroy them. They told Judge that. We're winning everywhere, but you just put up a press release. Is there any action taking place that you can see, particularly given the amazing revelations coming out of Bill Pulte's short run at DNI and the task force that John Solomon just dropped another bombshell on us, sir?
Wow, yes. And in regards to this declassified task force, unbelievable. We have been working, we've gone through, I think I told you last week, we've read every document that were declassified, and we put out another press release just to confirm everything that you have been talking about with John, that this is, in fact, a deep state. And this particular one, we picked out some documents we thought would be easy for Americans to understand, and that it shows that the NSA is actually admitting in the correspondence that they are keeping all of the China influence and interference that the intelligence community had uncovered. They are withholding that from the President of the United States. This is during 2020 with the Presidential Daily Brief. It was not in there at that time, which was around the October-November timeframe. They already knew that China had imported 20,000 fake driver's licenses. They had acquired 220 million voter records in order to mine the PII of American citizens. And they had this massive influence campaign going on to manipulate public opinion using not only just social media, but U.S. journalists that they had paid to write negative stories about Donald Trump. So we thought that this would be a really interesting follow-on to our last week, where we had Nikki Flores admit that she was running a shadow government as counterintelligence director of the FBI, or a deputy director. And now we've got the NSA in cahoots with massaging the information, withholding this from the president, all the Chinese connections, and not only the NSA, but you had also
Nikki Flores. You had Nikki
CIA,
Flores over the FBI as counterterrorism. You had Lisa Monaco, the deputy. She's running. They're all big shots. James Baker, I think he's at Twitter, general counsel. You got Nikki Flores. You got Lisa Monaco. Lisa Monaco, I think she's at Meta. Maybe she's not, but she's somewhere. One of these big Microsoft. These people ought to be rolled up today and put in cuffs and perp walked. They're running a shadow government. This is not wingnut conspiracy. These are documents. And the issue is who's following up. Pulte and Solomon are taking heroic stances. But who's following up? Is it going to be Garland Favorito? Did the people have to do everything? Did the people that fought there for 6 years and were threatened with prison and bankruptcy and all of it, these patriots in Georgia, did they have to put this burden on their shoulder? Because they're willing to do it. Give them the power. They'll roll these people up. The people in authority today, the time is late and the moment is urgent. We need action, action, action. No more talk and no more Instagrams of jumping out of helicopters and how great the FBI is. The FBI is not great. It's corrupt from top to bottom. This is a systemic problem. It's not about letting one or two guys go. That's not the problem. And if President Trump's administration if it is to end, right, either this November when these Marxists take the House or in 2028, if he determines he's not going to run for another term, you're going to have missed a golden opportunity because nothing's going to change. You just heard John Solomon call that Tom Cotton and John Thune. Obstructing justice was the term he used. So Department of Justice, where are we going after Tom Cotton and John Thune for obstruction of justice? Where are the transcripts from the Bannon Senate interview? Where are they? Why are we 6 months into this? Why are we 18 months into this? Why are we having this conversation today? And why does it take Garland Favorito and the folks down that understand that the vote was stolen in Georgia back in 2020 and have risked everything, their freedom and the little bit of money that they've put together to get to retirement, they've put it all on the line for this country. Now, why are the people in power not doing this? I'm going to have Lara Logan on here in a moment. She was at the top of her profession. They ran her out of everything because she stood up to this at the time. And now you're seeing that it's all true. Garland, I got to bounce. We're going to come back to you to do that full presentation. You've got your TED Talk. But until then, where do people go, sir?
It's voterga.org. We got a lot of information up there, and thank you for having us, Steve. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
You guys are amazing. The whole crew down there in Georgia, all of them, not just Voter GA, but all the people down there who fought for so long. Right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Lara Logan, and I'm gonna hold you to the break. You just got about a minute or so here, but ma'am, we now know that in May of 2017, as Trump's the commander in chief and going to the Middle East to try to sort out that mess and kick off what became the Abraham Accords, Comey, McCabe, and this crowd are setting up an official investigation of him, an official investigation as a Russian agent. Ma'am, your thoughts?
Steve, at that point, they already knew that Hillary Clinton's campaign had come up with this entire strategy in order to try to defeat Donald Trump in a presidential election. It was in late July, right, when John Brennan first briefed President Obama. And then there's another meeting on August 3rd at the White House when Clapper is there and Biden is there and, all of the usual suspects. So it's not just that they already knew this or they already knew that. They knew that Hillary Clinton had broken the law. They knew that her campaign had gone to a foreign nation and had hired Christopher Steele, a British spy, and it had gone to sources that belonged to the Russian intelligence, including Danishchenko is one of them, who later even distanced himself from what was in the dossier. They knew that it was a plan. And that what they should have done, if they had been doing their jobs and following the law, what they should have done at that moment was to launch an investigation into Hillary Clinton and all of her campaign. Fusion GPS, Mark Elias, the attorney from the law firm that was assisting in this, the former journalists from the Wall Street Journal that were part of Fusion GPS, Nellie Orr, whose husband Bruce Orr was at the Justice Department and was involved, and she was collecting this, this Russian information that was all basically made up. It was lies, it was innuendo, it was rumor, and it was false. The most important thing is that it was 100% false. So they knew all of this, and they didn't do anything about it. Instead, they went after the President of the United States.
Hang on 1 second. They also went after you. It's one of the reasons you're beloved. You're an American hero and a patriot. Short break. Logan on the other side.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Still Point at Turning World, End of the Dollar Empire, 8 free installments. You can put your name in for this back order, the book. But it's all free online. We've been putting it out for the last individual installments for the last 5 or 6 years when gold was, I don't know, $1,000, $1,100 an ounce. Got up over 5,000, now over 4,000. But it's about gold as a hedge. That's what you have to learn. When you start investing in gold, take gold, make sure you understand what's going on. It's upon you. And that's why we put this information on. It's all free, no obligation. birchgold.com/Bannon, End of the Dollar Empire. Immerse yourself. The 9th free installment is coming. As I've said, I just got to approve the graphics, and we'll be off to the races. Hopefully, they'll be in the next week or so. Lara Logan, I want to go back. We're going to drill down on this because you know it better than anybody because you were there and you fought it. But this is about the changes that must be made to the system and disruptors that come in and take leadership positions because you've been in positions of authority. 2 off the top that I witnessed they tried to break. One was Trump, because he was an apostate. He had worked his way from Queens into the system in Manhattan, the toughest real estate market in the world, and then media. And you know how tough that is to become a star and then to become president of the United States. You were at the top of the game at the Tiffany Network. And not just the Tiffany Network. It was the Tiffany Network's greatest news show they had, even with Mike Wallace and all the great, Walter Cronkite, everybody they had, Murrow, Edward R. Murrow, all of them. 60 Minutes was the crown jewel, and you were the star of 60 Minutes. They came after you to destroy you, ma'am, and they're still kind of trying to destroy you. We'll get to the Fauci thing in a second, but it's because you saw this and called them out. You said this is a deep state, and here's why it is a deep state, and you name names. That was the mortal sin you had against these people. It's one of the reasons you're beloved by the MAGA movement. You had the courage in the moment, not afterwards, in the moment to say, no, this is not right. And our country is going to be destroyed unless we call this out. Lara Logan.
You know, Steve, I didn't really understand the first time that I was attacked by the deep state, what was going on, because I was, I'd spent my whole life, I've been a journalist for more than 35 years. I spent my whole life believing that our job was to expose the truth. And it never entered into my head that politics was part of that, right? And so I just kept doing that. And what I think I've discovered was my mortal sin was that I wasn't controllable. I wasn't motivated by ego. I wasn't motivated by personal gain. There was nothing that they could hold over me. And in my DNA as a person, I think you share this DNA, right? I was completely uncontrollable because what guided me was principle. Right. And so they don't like it when you do that. So I was attacked for my reporting over Benghazi, but actually it was a report I did months before that I think somebody said to me, actually, when I was investigating this, somebody said to me, that was when you put the target on your back. And it's when I exposed that then President Barack Obama and his head of intelligence of the CIA at the time, George Tenet, had been lying about al-Qaeda, saying it was decimated, that it was on the run, that there were only 200 and something al-Qaeda guys left in the world. And I figured out, doing my due diligence as a reporter, that just by reading and cataloging the battlefield reports from Afghanistan, I could show that they were capturing and killing more al-Qaeda in, I don't know, a matter of weeks or a month, I don't remember exactly, than they said existed in the world. And then we went into a suicide bombing training camp where kids were being trained to kill Americans and so on. So I really showed that they were lying about Islam. And look where we are all these years later. Now the alliance between the left and the Islamists, or the Muslim jihadists and political Muslims, right, who have the goal of overthrowing Western civilization. Now we see how closely these forces are working together. And so what happens when you won't comply? What happens when you just, follow the facts wherever they take you? Like as a reporter, I remember being at 60 Minutes and someone quite senior there was on her way out of the office, and she stopped and poked her head into my office. Trump had just been elected, and she said to me, she said, my whole office, my producers, everybody, oh my God, they have the smoking gun. Trump is done. he was colluding with Russia. And what was that smoking gun? It was the Christopher Steele dossier. And when I heard that, I thought, let me see what's in this dossier. And you take a look, and it's not first-hand sources.
Hang on, slow down. Hang on. So you'd done the Obama expose. I remember that. Then you did the Benghazi report that everybody's heads blew up. You were there when they came in and ran in and said, "We got it. We got Trump's. He's an agent. He's a Russian agent," and they're skipping around about the smoking gun. You remember when that happened?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget it in my whole life, because there was something about it, your gut instinct as a reporter, right? Something didn't add up. And I wanted to know the truth. I wasn't a Donald Trump fan. In fact, my father called me from South Africa and said, "What on earth is going on over there with this Trump guy?" And I said, "Dad, don't be ridiculous. This guy, he's a real estate guy. He's not even serious about running," because I believed the propaganda. Right? I didn't take Trump seriously. And I had never looked at Donald Trump. I'd never thought about it, because my beat was national security, terrorism, counterterrorism, all of this. I stayed out of American politics out of respect for the American people, because I didn't grow up here. I wasn't familiar with Democrats and Republicans in the way that every American was. And so I thought that was a beat that was better left to American reporters. And then they made everything political, and there was no escape. And so when I heard about the Steele dossier, I took one look at this and I'm like, "You're kidding me. What do you mean unverified? Why are we breaking with tradition, breaking with protocol, breaking with standards, and reporting something as unverified, but we're treating it as if it's verified?" That was a red flag for me. And then they just kept piling up. Remember when they accused Trump of leaking classified information to the Russians, right? This was another part of their information warfare strategy, to just keep throwing stuff in the air. Okay, the tactic is called ambiguity increasing. So we're just going to keep throwing stuff up. It was the Magnitsky meeting, and then it was, Trump Tower, Deutsche Welle, Mike Flynn, Carter Page, George Stephanopoulos. They didn't stop, right? Throwing crap into the air that basically then would obscure the truth. Ambiguity increasing. So one of the first things was that they said that Trump really, leaked classified information. Now, if you know anything about classified information, and it's not hard, you can literally just look it up online, go to the law, and there it is. The commander-in-chief is the only person in the United States of America where the act of speaking is an act of declassification. So what does that mean? It's not possible for the commander-in-chief to leak. And so when Joe Biden went out and said it was SEAL Team 6 that killed bin Laden, he was vice president. He didn't have that legal right. He broke the law and leaked classified information. When Obama said it, he was perfectly within his rights. When Ronald Reagan in the 1980s at a press conference talked about the National Reconnaissance Organization, one of the most clandestine organizations in the history of this country, it was an act of declassification. Everybody was panicking because nobody could believe he actually said it, but it was nevertheless perfectly legal. So how does every newspaper in the country, New York, the venerable New York Times, right, that we're all supposed to worship at the altar of the Gray Lady, and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, why are they all reporting this when the truth is right there? And it never ended from that moment on. I mean, I remember people looking at me, treating me like I was crazy because I said Mike Flynn didn't do what they're saying that he did. He was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He had multiple contacts with the Russians. That was part of his job, as it was with every intelligence service in the world. And by the way, there was a Washington Post article, and I wish I could still find this article, but it was by the same reporters that did the article that got, that preceded Mike Flynn's big firing, right, or resignation. And what they said was that the FBI had been through the tapes of Mike Flynn's controversial conversation with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, when the conversation right before they came into office, after they'd won the election, and they said that he had been completely and utterly cleared. Well, that article mysteriously disappeared. And you know what? I took that article and I sent it to the entire staff at CBS News. Everything that I was reporting and finding out, I was sending out to them, because I would see things being done that I knew were false. Like, for example, the New York Times did a big hit piece on Flynn when he was head of, and talked about him when he was national security advisor, and they were scornful of him and said, This was a man, they quoted people being at a meeting saying he didn't even know the laws with weapons and how to sell weapons and what it meant and how to do that. They had to explain it to him at a meeting, and that he also didn't know about how to call up the National Guard. All I'm going to tell you is that General Michael Flynn was head of the agency that was literally set up with the legal charter that they were responsible for tracking and tracing American weapons from the time they're built to the time that they no longer exist. There is no one who personally knows more than the head of the DIA about how weapons are sold and who needs what Congress's role is and so on and so on. And so just to say that, for the New York Times to print that, that was proof to me that these people had not only lost their minds, but they had lost sight of their jobs, lost sight of their role, that they were active participants in a conspiracy to bring down a legally elected president. They are co-conspirators in treason and sedition. This goes beyond propaganda to actual criminal activity. And the moment I was going to talk about any of this, the moment I tried to say any of this, I was cast as being far right. I was disparaged as being pro-Trump. I was kicked to the curb, tossed out like the trash, and they came for me with a vengeance. And you know what I got to tell you, Steve? It's one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I can look in the mirror every single day and know that I told the truth. I did my job for the right reasons, and I did it the right way, and I don't regret any of it. They absolutely set me free. It was one of the worst things they ever did, because I will never be owned by any of these people. Do you know there's a tactic they use, Steve? You may remember when they did this to you. Maybe you're so, with such kryptonite, they didn't bother with you. But there's a tactic that they use after they attack you. When they have you where they think that you're at your lowest point. Basically, you can imagine you're lying on your back in the dirt, right? And they got their foot right on your throat. And then they reach down with a hand and they offer you a leg up. And if you take that hand, they own you for the rest of your life. Yeah. I never took that hand. They invited me to a private dinner with Hillary Clinton after my Benghazi reporting, and I said,
hang on one second. I want to give the payoff after a short break. Lara Logan.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Laura, go ahead and finish. And we need the payoff for that. They offered you essentially a bribe about sitting down and having a one-on-one with Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been sent home from CBS, in disgrace. I'd been forced to apologize for my Benghazi story on air, and, and sort of life is falling apart. And out of the blue, a journalist I knew from South Africa years before, who was never my closest friend or anything, but he calls me up like we're biggest buddies. And he's like, guess what? Just by the way, I'm, going to this little private dinner with Hillary Clinton, and she would love to have you there. You're invited. And I thought, why in the world would I sit down with Satan's wife? Right? I mean, I didn't want to do that. There was no chance in hell. My food would be poisoned, right? I mean, apart from anything else, I'd choke. So there wasn't ever a moment in my life when I considered that I would sit down with Hillary Clinton, because I knew how evil she was. And I knew that she was responsible for the deaths of Glenn Doherty and Ty Woods and Ambassador Stevens in Benghazi. And she had lied about it. So there wasn't a chance in hell I was going to that dinner. And I said as much on the phone. And I think my husband looked at me afterwards when I hung up and said to me, you just said no. They just offered you a leg up and you just said no. And I said, and I'll say no again every day for the rest of my life. And you know what, Steve? You can see who took the hand, right? I'll tell you who took the hand. Here's two generals, General McChrystal versus General Flynn. General McChrystal, they don't attack him anymore. The runaway general whose entire career was ruined by the Rolling Stones magazine. Yeah, sure. Right. They don't attack General McChrystal. In fact, he is lauded with praise, and he's got government contracts, and he's the go-to guy for this and for that. Well, that's how you know he took the hand. General Flynn, they attack him every single day. And you don't have to agree with everything that he says and does, but just look at the reality. The other one that took the hand, General Allen, took the hand. He was fired because of things he said actually to me in a 60 Minutes interview, in part, where he admitted that Pakistan was not an ally. They were an enemy of the United States, and American soldiers were dying because of them on the Afghan battlefield. And then lo and behold, guess what? His career is ended, but then he gets a second chance at life. So you can see across the playing field those who continually get attacked, who will always be attacked. They're the ones who didn't take the hand. They're the ones that still remain out there. They've got their souls. They've got their freedom. They are not owned by anybody.
By the way, I'm announced now we're going to have Lara on tomorrow. We got a whole situation with Fauci, but it's too good about how they went after about Fauci, but it's too good to jam in here with the time we have remaining. When did you, since you had the national security beat at the crown jewel of the Tiffany network, and so many of these people, for sources, they became colleagues, friends, some of them. When did it dawn on you that people that had dedicated their lives to the defense of this country, of this republic, and had gone to work, in these great institutions, the United States military, the DIA, CIA, FBI, all these revered institutions, that institutionally that they had changed, but more importantly, the institutions had turned from defense of this republic to actually control of this republic for their own means, ma'am?
The first thing was radical Islam or Islamic terrorism or, whatever you want to call it. When they started lying about Al-Qaeda being defeated, when they started lying about Afghanistan, that's when I became really concerned the first time. And I thought, this doesn't make any sense. Like, if I know how many people they're killing on the battlefield, then they know. And what was the response of the Obama administration to my reporting was to ban all battlefield reporting by those institutions that I'd been relying on. So it wasn't that they wanted to be transparent and honest, it was that they wanted to cover it up. And then you had people like Admiral Mullen. I remember just being shocked that Admiral Mullen, who was then, I think, in the Joint Chiefs, you had all these people that were just going to go along with it. And then it started to pile up. But I think at the moment when I saw that Carter Page, here was a man who had been to the Naval Academy, was a naval graduate. Russia was his specialty. He spoke Russian. So he was recruited by the CIA. He was recruited by the FBI. He helped put Russian spies, get them convicted of spying and acts against the United States. And what did they do? They went after this man. And they didn't just go after him. They suppressed the evidence that he was working for the CIA at the time. And they did this all the way up to the FISA court. So you knew, and then, it started to come out that Mike Flynn had been outed, right, by all those people during the Obama administration who had unmasked him. Well, unmasking is absolutely catastrophic to the United States of America. That has never been given the attention that it deserves, because the most sacred document after the Bible, the most sacred document on earth is the United States Constitution. And that Fourth Amendment is not optional. It's not something that you just pick up and put down whenever you feel like it. So the unmasking of General Flynn, which was this is really a violation of the Fourth Amendment of one of the most powerful people in this country, how they had just been so cavalier about doing that for political reasons, and the hundreds of times that he'd been unmasked. And what was this all about? Well, the United States, by law, we have the right to spy on foreign diplomats and the people around them, but we do not have the right to spy on American citizens. And so if you're going to do that and you're going to unmask the American citizen that they were talking to, this is an absolutely catastrophic violation of the United States Constitution. And what I saw was all of these institutions, FBI going along, doing their part, CIA doing their part, the White House doing their part, the FISA courts, the lower courts. I just saw an absolute catastrophic failure of every single institution extending to the media, which is part of the First Amendment of the Constitution. I saw people abandoning their principles, abandoning their oaths, and they were doing it in droves. I mean, I just couldn't believe my eyes. And then they were attacking me for doing it. And you know what was disgusting to me was all those people in the first Trump administration who had access to all this information. The members of Congress who knew, the people in like the National Security Advisor. I mean, I was so disappointed in the Secretary of Defense. The Marine, I can't remember his name right now. It escapes me, but
Mattis.
The big
Jim Mattis.
Yeah,
Jim
and
Mattis.
even before, yes, Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, who the soldiers all loved, who wanted to bring Michelle Flournoy in as his deputy, Hillary Clinton's chosen Secretary of Defense, Steve. I'll tell you something. I can't tell you who it is, but I'll tell you when I was in I had just come out of Mosul. I'd been on the front line for 60 minutes on the fight to take Mosul back from ISIS. It was absolutely brutal, and it was a very bloody, very dangerous fight. And I was in Dubai on my way back to the U.S. when the election was happening. By the time I landed in the United States, I thought that the world would have ended and Hillary Clinton, the witch from hell, would have taken over, right? It would have stolen that election. But instead, I landed to 100 messages about Donald Trump winning, which I couldn't believe. I made a phone call to a very senior person in the incoming administration. And you know what he told me? He said that Michelle Flournoy, who was chosen by Hillary Clinton to be her future SecDef, had already moved into the Pentagon. She had moved staff into the Pentagon. They had taken over offices. They had taken over desks. They had demanded briefing papers, and they were refusing to leave the building. What does that say to you? These are people, remember at the time, Hillary didn't want to concede defeat, right? She hadn't even campaigned. These are people who had a plan. They had already figured out, they thought that they had stolen the election, but the cheat was reversed that time around. It was small enough, and the Trump campaign was aware enough, and there were good people whose names I cannot mention, but who I know who they are because I was talking to them throughout, who were working on this problem and who reversed the cheat in 2016. That's why it was so astonishing that they weren't able to do that the second time around, and I still don't understand everything about it. But what I saw was just by following the truth, which had nothing to do with Donald Trump in one respect, by the way, because the truth, there's only one truth. It stands on its own. It doesn't matter how you or I might differ in how we perceive it or how we feel about it or what we want to do about it. All of that is subjective. But the truth itself is our salvation as journalists, because it doesn't ever change. It doesn't care who's in office. It doesn't care who's going to be affected. That's not the concern of the truth. And so when you follow the truth, no matter what, you might make mistakes along the way. It's not easy to get to the whole truth. There's stuff that's concealed. You get deceived. I'm not immune. These tactics are effective, not because they're complicated, but because they work. Right? We're all exposed to it. We see everybody reporting the same lies, and we think, well, it must be true. What did Goebbels say? If you tell a lie big enough, no one will believe it isn't true. Well, that happens to all of us. It affects us. And yet, there is only one truth. It's not that complicated. They use the same patterns all the time. I'm so proud of all those people in your audience and all over America who recognize this and speak up, and they're not going to buy it. That's why when you see like that idiot, I call him Baby Beto, aka Little Satan, right? That horrible little child that they have selected to say is going to win in Texas, James Tallarico. Okay, when you see that, people aren't falling for it. They chose Beto O'Rourke, the white boy, and they gave him an Italian name. And you know who protests Beto O'Rourke when he comes to my town? Hispanic people, because they're like, come on, we're not so dumb. We can see through this. So they couldn't get Beto O'Rourke in, but you know what? They cheated, and they got him within 3% in the official reporting in that election. Actually, Ted Cruz beat him by more than 12%. But Republicans are complicit in the cheat, and they don't expose it when it happens to them, and they keep covering up for the Democrats, and they keep screwing over the American people by being cowards. Just like when John Solomon was talking in your earlier segment about Tom Cotton and Senator Thune. Are you serious? Are you serious? 2 Republican senators are holding up the accountability that the entire country needs, and it might only be
Brennan.
For this investigation in Florida?
Well, Tom Cotton is the senator from the deep state. Laura, we got to bounce. Look, you're going to come back tomorrow because I got a whole thing on Fauci and how they went after you when you had the courage to stand up to him. Where do people go for all your content, ma'am? Because I can tell you the audience loves you, and you are absolutely on fire. And we're going to talk about Texas tomorrow also. Where do people go?
My show is Going Rogue with Lara Logan. It's all over social media. You can find it on my X account. We have all the episodes that are on my website, laralogan.com. And of course, it's at Lara Logan. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere. That hasn't, for some reason, I haven't been booted off just yet. I think God's looking out for me, Steve. It's definitely not the deep state.
Do you have a Twitter handle? What's your handle on Twitter?
Yes, at Lara Logan on X.
Okay. Ma'am, thank you. We're going to see you tomorrow morning. We're going to go do Fauci in Texas. Thank you so much.
The
Amazing.
evil little man.
The evil little man. Texas tomorrow. Thank God Abbott has stepped up and said going to be a moratorium on data centers. This afternoon, we're going to get more into AI, all types of breaking news. The Hormuz deal, I think, hopefully, I don't think it's been announced yet, announced this afternoon. The president's speaking live in Vegas. We're going to cover that. We're going to also have, I think over the next couple of days, we're going to try to get to the gubernatorial candidates in the Republican primary in the free state of Florida. That race has gotten pretty intense, and so we're going to be talking to a couple of three of the leading candidates. Also, the AI, Joe Allen. Joe Allen is out and about, as you know, spreading the word. Another great story of him, I think, in Wired, about Joe Allen and the fight against data centers. Also, about this AI executive order that's being worked on. I don't know if it's going to be published or not, which is kind of a problem, right? You can't ascertain what's going on with it, but we're going to get to all that. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code Steve. Check it out today. They give you a 2-week free kind of ride on the $1 million triple lock protection. You work with Natalie Dominguez and the team, and you find out how they secure your title. What you can't have happen is somebody get hands on the title, not even selling your property, taking out a hard money loan against it where you owe the principal back plus the interest on your castle, where every dream you've ever had is there.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
That's the $1 million triple lock protection. Make sure you've got that. Because now, particularly as this economy, 80% of your net worth is tied up in that, in your castle, your home. So make sure you don't lose it. Also, Chapter has saved the War and Posse $1 million or more just on getting the best, or the optimum, I should say, the optimum Medicare plan for you. I know this totally freaks people out when you talk about Medicare. This is Medicare without tears, 845 War Room. It's a direct line. I think the analysis is 40 to 50% of the people that talk to Chapter are now recommending it. War Room Posse members calling the number are now recommending it to a friend because it helps. It's a data company. It helps you sort everything out. 845 Chapter. Make sure you do it today. Totally free, no obligation. This is the key. Totally free, no obligation. Dr. John Oertle. Dr. John, America Health Shares. This is where I tell people, particularly with the Obamacare thing collapsing and the government pulling out for some underwriting of it, the insurance, health insurance is getting more and more complicated every day to even think and figure it out. What I love about what you guys have done is a totally different alternative. Now, it takes a little due diligence. So just walk us through what is the construct? Why is this different than just going and paying these enormous bills? Because we now know people are having to make a decision between, am I putting food on the table for the family? Am I paying my rent? I'm going to pay my health insurance. You guys have come up with a totally different model. What is it, and how do people think it through and find out if it's right for themselves?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for being with us, or thanks for having me on today. When it comes to America's health share, we've done different than traditional insurance. And as a health share, we're fighting for Americans specifically on the realm of transparency. So when you're transparent in your costs, when you're actually, what you're paying for, and there's a transparency, there's in the deep state, they love to talk about, how it's ambiguity. There's ambiguity everywhere, and you don't know. This is what we're seeing with healthcare as well. We're seeing that everybody likes to claim that, it's Dr. Fauci, pleading the fifth, and the ability to, again, to not have this transparency within healthcare. Well, America's health share is taking that back. And what we do is we make healthcare transparent. And so I'll give you an example of, we just had a recent bill come on in for a hospital that was $50,000 for an actual service that the hospital provided. We repriced this bill down to $800. I thought this was an error. I thought it was an error because I thought there was something with our algorithm that actually made this incorrectly priced because of the historical pricing of other hospitals or Medicare pricing. What we actually found is that wasn't incorrect. This was actually the correct price. So on average, we're actually repricing, again, 62% of medical costs. And this is actually then passed forward to our members. So our members on average are saving 60% from going from switching from a traditional health insurance over to America's Health Share. And so it's incredibly important to us to be able to make sure that there is transparency. You know what the actual cost of healthcare is. You know what procedures are charged so that we can actually go to bat and advocate and fight for our members to be able to have an affordable price. We're reaching the Affordable Care Act just continues to increase our prices year over year over year. And we're coming upon open enrollment now where we're still seeing an increase in your premiums year over year. We've been continuing to be able to keep that flat line, to be able to make sure that we're able to pass that savings on to our members. And not only are we giving the transparency within the current conventional medical system, but we also are advocates, and we've been doing innovation in healthcare for years. I personally have innovated various therapies and treatments to be able to improve outcomes with our patients. And as a result of this innovation, we've been able to drive people into alternative options for their healthcare. This is where I think when I ask Americans about is there better healthcare options, people don't know how to get those options. You know, the options that CEOs of companies are going to integrative functional doctors, getting actual better testing performed. And yet insurance companies are not covering these things. And there's a lack of willingness to be able to actually direct patients to these options. And with America's, we embrace this full force to be able to say there's better healthcare out there. We know that there is. I see it in the data. You know, we think that these insurance companies are just covering the latest and best of data. You know, I have an article coming on out talking about, you know, how do we see technology specifically in the realm of looking at imaging? And this is where it's when you go in to be able to get imaging done, mammogram on an MRI or other breast imaging, that there's actually technology out there that you can evaluate the cancer that put you at risk to see if the cells are changing before the breast cancer even begins. And this is not covered by your insurance. And people think that, you know, we're technology and innovation is happening in healthcare, but if you don't have a coverage on it, or you can't get your insurance company to cover it and you don't know about it, well, you don't have access to it. And this is how nice would it be to be able to actually have the ability to run imaging on breast screening and then evaluate to be able to see, is there a risk? You don't have breast cancer, but you have a risk to developing cancer in the next 5 years. And Steve, this is technology. This studies came on out back in 2024. And so this is where with America's, you have this advocate to say there's better healthcare, there's transparent costs, and then you're not trading affordability for your comprehensiveness and better healthcare. And we do this at America's to be able to keep costs affordable.
I want it's freedomforhealth.org/Bannon. I want everybody to go there now and engage. What I want is a conversation. I'm absolutely convinced, and I've seen this. If you reach out to the American Health Share people, you start to understand this, you will switch over to their model, which I think is amazing. One more time, it's Freedom for Health Share, freedomforhealth.org/Bannon. Doc, thank you so much for setting this up. You're the Chief Medical Officer, and thank you for coming on this morning. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Steve.
Hey, Charlie Kirk. By the way, it's 845 War Room. It's not 845 chapter, it's 845 War Room. And America's Health Share. freedomforhealth.org/Bannon. If you do the switch, you get the first month for free, but that's not the reason to do it. That's just an added benefit. Charlie Kirk. Okay, we're back. President's supposed to speak at 4:30 in Nevada. I'll be with bowling. We're going to do some kind of switch over. However, as you know how that goes, may start a little late, may run a little long, but we've got a jam-packed show at 5 o'clock. So we'll see you then, 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, when you're back in the world. Charlie Kirk, Andrew Corvette next.